Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Breaking Down Racial Barriers Roundtable Discussions. My name is Sam Rayner. I am the Industry Development and Membership Coordinator of the Canadian Independent Music Association, CIMA. First of all, this series is on a national platform with a national audience. And with deep respect, we would like to honor and acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations across Canada. Now, just to give you a bit of information about CIMA, we are a national trade association. CIMA is here to represent the interest of the Canadian independent industry. So our members can consist of companies from all across Canada, such as independent record labels, managers, publishers, recording studios, and anybody else who really kind of lays in the area of the independent world. CIMA represents the industry in a handful of ways by advocating for the industry, creating exporting opportunities, and hosting professional development sessions like these. And with these sessions, we strive to represent on a national level that properly reflects the many diverse communities that participate and contribute to our sector as a first step to the long road towards establishing an equitable and inclusive industry. The series has been here and designed for everyone. So businesses, artists, music industry associations like CIMA to listen to and to learn from the lived experiences of Black working professionals we work with every day. BDRB is a CIMA project in joint partnership with Ian and Click, and they have worked tirelessly on programming and ensuring that the format of these conversations address many different intersections of identity and perspectives. So we could not have done this without you, Ian and Click. So thank you so much for participating and being here with us for this really important important conversations. And a big thanks to CIMA's administrative coordinator, Matthew Baydu, for his assistance on the entire series. First of all, just also like to acknowledge the funding support of the Government of Canada, Factor, and Ontario Creates. For episode 5, we also have 2 organizations as an episode supporter and sponsor. And so thank you to the Canadian Federation of Musicians and the Music Video Production Project, a joint RBC X Music and Prism Prize initiative. So thank you for both supporting this episode specifically. And we have had many partners on each different episode. So the idea is to get as many organizations participating as possible so we can get them to listen to these conversations, but also to help promote as many people to listen to these conversations as possible. And if there's any other organizations that are interested, please let me know. And also we have to most definitely I'm happy to have advances supporting this 10-part series as well. And I would like to pass this on to CIMA's president for additional remarks.
Thanks, Sam. Hey, everybody. I just wanted to reiterate some of what Sam had said, and I do have to point out that Sam and Matt on the CIMA team have done amazing work behind the scenes putting this all together. So I wanted to thank them publicly for all of their efforts. Ian and Click are amazing partners, and they have done yeoman's work just to put everything together, to put all of these ideas and the webinars together. And the whole point of this is, of course, to have a deep discussion on breaking down racial barriers in the music community in Canada, but it has to be more than a discussion. And as we're saying, this is the foundational piece. This is beginning the conversation, but we're all committed, and CIMA is certainly committed to helping make positive change beyond the discussion. And our board of directors is committed to that. And we expect that this will lead to, as I said, positive change. The part of the process, of course, is us listening to the community, and that's what we're doing through this, through outreach and dialogue, and as I said, listening about what the issues are and what the actions should be going forward. And we know that we may make mistakes going forward to try to correct the wrongs, but we are counting on you to help us constructively out on this journey. So I wanted to thank our panelists today. I wanted to thank everybody out there who is out there listening, and our colleagues that are helping us put us together, like Advance and the others that Sam had named. So I'm looking forward to today's session. And with that, Click, please take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. I can't believe this is our 5th week already, and we have another 5 weeks ahead of us. My name is David Click Cox, and I'm a 25-plus year music exec. I've worked for labels. I was an artist at one point. I've done pretty much everything you can think of in this business. And I'm also involved in Advance, which is the Black Professional Music Collective. And the purpose of it is for us to join and us to mobilize and us to advocate on behalf of working Black professionals in the music business. So if you are not a member, I highly recommend signing up. You can go to advancemusic.org and sign up and stay tuned into what they have coming down the pipeline. The purpose of these roundtables was something that myself and Ian had come together to feel like we needed a space where Black professionals in Canada have a space to speak about the issues that we've been dealing with in this industry, and also coming together to talk about what solutions can be done to rectify these barriers. So today's convo, I'm excited because we're talking about Black creatives, ad agencies. This is an area that is part of the ecosystem of the music industry and the entertainment industry. So Ian, take it away.
Yep. So, as Click said, we are the Martin and the Malcolm of this. He is more here to gather Black people together to speak about the things that we've faced in the industry, and I'm more here to militantly push the powers that be to change oppressive structures and end as much as possible as we can in 10 weeks and 10 years anti-Black racism in the music industry. So this is this is Breaking Down Racial Barriers. I'd like to introduce our guests, or I'd like you to all introduce yourselves. We'll start with the ladies. No one jump. Ashley?
Sure. My name is Ashley McKenzie-Barnes. I'm an independent curator and creative director. I'm sure some people might be familiar with the work as a curator, so I won't jump too much into it, but last maybe New Week launch, one of the 2019 curators, and most recently a festival at Harbourfront and the Mike is On series that's up still. I guess too, from an advertising agency, I'm one of the ones that have been a creative director and director of creative operations in both the advertising agency and the corporate world, and have been doing that for 10 plus years. So got lots to say on the topic. Happy to join. A lot of familiar faces here.
Christine?
Yeah, so my name is Christine Boachie. I'm a director, a photographer, producer. I kind of do it all in this space. I am independent. I've been doing this for about 4 years now. So I'm pretty new. I'm still a baby in the industry, but I definitely have seen and learned a lot. So I'm happy to share with you guys today.
Okay. Kaya?
Hi, I'm Kaya. I'm a music supervisor. It's okay. I'm a music supervisor at The Wilders. I place music into TV, film, and advertising. Previously worked at a media planner within the advertising space. So happy to speak about both of them. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Over to our director, HINDZ.
Hey, everybody. Yes, my name is HINDZ, creative director, also a content creator right now. And I'm in Vancouver, BC, been working in the industry for close to 10 years now in Canada. And yes, it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Who did we miss? Kevin and Imad.
Hey, I'm Kevin Johnson. I'm a CEO of Mediacom, which is an agency. And I've been in the business probably about as long as Click has been in his. So I obviously been on a journey as it relates to this conversation. So happy to join and share my observations.
And finally.
Hey everyone, my name is Imad Elsheikh. I'm the executive producer for my production studio and platform called PIQUE. We produce branded content, commercials, documentaries, music videos, and other artist creative collabs. And previous work is with Adidas Canada, CBC, Novus, the Raptors, Red Bull, and then labels, as well as independent artists, but with Warner, Universal, E1, so on.
Perfect. And I'm your host, Ian Andre Espinet. I am a 25-year veteran of the industry. I own a graphic design and communications company as well as an entertainment hub. And I'm just going to go straight in because we only have Kevin for a short period of time and we're happy to have him. So obviously this conversation was prompted by violence against Black people in the States and has caused a worldwide conversation. In your opinion, in your industry, how far down diversity road do you find that the ad agency is, Kevin? The ad agency world is in terms of not just executives, but overall creatives.
How far down the road did you say?
Yeah.
Look, I think right now there is a lot of investigation. We don't have specific stats around at each level how do Blacks make up that particular position or area, and I think that is kind of some of the quick things that we are trying as an agency and an industry to get together, is to really understand where we are. Anecdotally, we know it's not where we need to be. But I think it's positive that we're actually getting some empirical data that says this is what we thought and it was validated. I think at the same time what's happening is some uncomfortable conversations. And I think for all of us, regardless of what field or background we have, I think that uncomfortable conversations are good, and they're kind of the necessary thing that needs to happen. Because once you get that, then we can talk about solutions and fixing some of the problems that we have. So for the industry that I'm in, Black executives at a senior level are next to none. I'm probably one of very few. And I would say that we have an issue specifically around any positions that are senior, and we need to get at that real quick.
Okay, Kaya, as a music supervisor, how many Black people do you see in your space? Unmute.
In Canada specifically, there is a very, very limited amount. It's a small industry in this country as is, so the representation isn't there. In the US, there is quite a handful there, and they work more specifically, well, across the board on different types, but there are some more content that's catered towards the Black experience that you have in the US, so we're finding that there's quite an underrepresentation in the Canadian sphere.
HINDZ? Unmute.
Sorry, I would say it's very similar in my field. There's a lack of diversity with Black people for sure, but it's also a small population. But I think there's definitely room for more of us to come into it.
Okay. Ashley, creatives.
Are we talking about from a curatorial standpoint?
From a graphic design standpoint, as a creative director.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a positioning through and through. Like in the agency side, a lot of my creative existed in the agency platform in the corporate world, and I was always the only one that was there. I've never had the privilege of getting employed and working with another Black creative, whether it be an art director. And it's exactly what Kevin said: the higher you go up, the less you see. So part of what I was doing was bringing in more BIPOC folk in the employment, hence where I'm at now as an independent.
Okay. Christine?
I think my experience is definitely the same as everyone else's. Like, I don't see a lot of people that look like me. A lot of the times, much like Ash's experience, I am the only one being a Black woman in those spaces. So I think that we definitely are underrepresented in our spaces. However, there is a lot of, I guess on my side, there are a lot of people who are eager to join. I think they don't really have the infrastructure or know how or where to join our industry or kind of join like the community. It is a small community of people that are doing things that are bigger And I don't think that they totally understand where to find these people or how to get in contact with them. So.
And Imad, you have like your own agency. You know, what was your experience and what led to that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna also echo what everybody said. It's the exact same thing, especially the higher up you go. It's not the same as the people, I guess, that I would hire on my team. And luckily I could do that for production. And for jobs, I can get more BIPOC involved. And it's the same like Ashley's saying and the others here. So that's obviously super important. And part of the reason why I started my own production studio is I selfishly wanted to do my own thing, but I also wanted to get other people involved, other people that I knew in the community, and got them on jobs that would like build their career and strengthen their career in the future. So the only time I see it is when it's my own jobs, but I don't see it elsewhere, and I'd like to see it more.
So Kevin, like being, and this seems to be something that everyone's echoing, being the only person that you, the only executive, possibly even the only CEO in Canada of a major agency, what percentage of representation do you think is needed within a company to change oppressive culture? You know, there's one person that can stand up when somebody says something racist. There's two people who can say, we need this. What is the percentage of representation that needs to be present to change the culture?
Look, I'm not sure we need a percentage because you can have an overwhelming, a high percentage in an agency and still, I believe, be oppressive in many different ways. I think it has to, so if I use my own agency, I'm going to guess that there's probably close to 50% are from a minority group or a different ethnic group, visible minority. But for me, the stronger point is the culture and the expectation that we have of the individuals that make up the agency. And so we are always celebrating the different foods around the world, the different experiences, the different ideas. We're always celebrating that. And I think when you're always in a mode of celebrating other cultures and other way of thinking, that's exactly what our creative industry needs, right? How do we create great ideas? It's not just from all the same people thinking about the same thing. It's no, I'm from Jamaica, I'm from Rexdale, and my experiences from that background helps me to create different ideas. And Ian, you'll have different experiences, and Click will have different ones as well. And so that's what's needed in our creative space, is the idea that we can bring different people from different backgrounds together to make great ideas. And so for me, it's less about the number and more about the culture.
Okay. Ash, what do you think, what are your suggestions, or what would you say is necessary to improve Black representation in these high ranks of the creative directors and the high ranks of the agencies that we're speaking of?
It's twofold too, because I think that a lot of, it's a little bit rooted in the system, and it's also rooted in how we see ourselves as creatives. So a lot of creatives I've worked with, especially like BIPOC folks, it's also understanding the education and the prep that goes into those positions, and making sure that you feel that you're not suffering, from imposter syndrome, that you feel like you can go and be seated in these roles, right? And I think a lot of times, especially when creatives are self-taught and they're getting into these ideas of wanting to be a creative director, an art director, and you see the titles, we all know it, we see the titles widely used, curator and creative director, and what that necessarily holds. So when we talk about going into agencies, a lot of the time you do need the experience, you do need the education. So it's also me challenging the younger Black folks, especially, to get to the place that they want to take that serious enough to go through the rankings that they need to go to have themselves placed in those positions. So that's one. And then second is how we employ. So again, you know, I also have my own small agency, and a lot of the work that people see that are being done, whether it's for, you know, Walmart or Harborfront or Universal or whoever, whatever contract I'm working on, I run under my own agency where I can employ videographers, photographers, graphic designers, producers, writers, people who are of color. And I think that that was a big thing for me when I was going independent, is showing them that they can put these things in their portfolios, and that they can expand their portfolios to go beyond what we think is community or what we think are passion projects or we're kind of doing for fun or on the side, and actually like placing ourselves in this corporate environment that a lot of Black creatives feel they don't belong in, or systematically they resist. And I don't know if that's the key. So it lies within us as creatives. We can't resist these roles if we want to make change in the systems. We can't resist these roles if we want to climb and get to the point where myself or Kevin are in these creative director or these director positions or these CEO positions. You can't resist the system, right? You have to get into the system. And I think so a lot of it is a mind state that we have to alter. And then we can start, you know, pushing for those roles. We can start grabbing for the Kevins and the Ashleys in these roles and say, hey, I have the experience, I have the education, I have the portfolio, and I want to be placed in it. So it's twofold. And that's how you also get exposure to the non-BIPOC folks that are in these hiring positions as well.
Okay, and so I'm going to come to Christina and Kaya in a moment, but HINDZ, Imad, and Kevin, you know, Ashley spoke about working inside of these organizations. What about the possibility of creation of our own Black-owned agencies? Is there a lack of Black-owned agencies, and if so, what are the reasons for that, and what are the solutions to it?
I can chime in on something actually. So I've seen others creating agencies, other BIPOC ones, and it's great. I worry more about the sustainability of it. So like, for example, in order to kind of build and hire more creatives, I'm more interested in like the full-time opportunities rather than always thinking about contract ones, and being able to have partners where we can have. It's the same thing like with a company or personal. Like if you're an individual, you want to be hired full-time. If you're running an agency, you want to have more agreements, long-term agreements with brands rather than just contracts all the time. Because I can, myself or other BIPOC agencies can build a longer future or a more sustainable future if they have more MSAs or if they have more long-term agreements where they can use that to like build a bigger team, be a bit more like have benefits, have like an office space, equipment that you can invest in. Like I think those are all important things, not only to start, but to make it sustainable.
Perfect. HINDZ?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many Black-owned agencies there are, but I think that's a problem in itself. I think there needs to be more communication, almost like a bridge in the country, because I feel Toronto is very much its own thing. I feel Vancouver is kind of it's in its own bubble, and then the rest of Canada is kind of misplaced. And I don't feel there's enough connections between the East Coast and the West Coast in working together, and also creating platforms together and teams together and hiring together. Because in Vancouver, it's a very small opportunity. Most people will leave here and go to Toronto. Once you get to a certain spot, everyone's leaving and going to Toronto because they feel that's where everything is. And here, there's just no mentorship to even know how to go in that direction.
So Kevin, you know, agencies work in like have sub-agencies and other agencies that they work with. Have you noticed like a move towards like an increase in demand for agencies asking for Black-led or Black-owned agencies in their rosters?
I think it's early for that, just based on what has happened thus far. So look, I have a couple comments. One is, I don't think the answer to this problem that we have today is to create everybody run and go and create a Black agency. I actually think that it's advantageous, to Ashley's point, that we need to get in there and mix it up versus going and creating our own thing. I think that as Blacks coming into this into this industry, we need to have exposure to creating great ideas on the P&Gs, on the Dells, on the Adidases, all of these very big, stoic, great brands to work on. And where's that going to happen? That's going to happen naturally in the larger agencies. But not only that, we need to learn to work with other people from other cultures as well, because we need to do some learning as well. And so I think it's really important that we get in there and mix it up, because by doing so, we're actually helping the industry. When I mentor, I'm from Rexdale. I go back and I mentor to and have conversations with a group called Trust 15. And when we have, the first thing I tell them is, when I think about my success, I don't think about the piece of paper that I got from Humber College. I think it's important, but I don't think it was the thing that helped my success. When I think about my success and what got me here, it was the ability to break down and find solutions. And the reason why I think I'm able to do that is because I had to find bus money. I had to find rent money. I had to break down these very real challenges in Rex that somebody else wouldn't necessarily have from an impoverished community. And so that's what I think makes me successful. And if that's what makes me successful, then it makes them have the same opportunity that I have. We got to get in there and mix it up and share our own lens of great ideas from our background.
So I have a two-part question pertaining to that. So I believe that the revolution will be fought on two fronts. CLIQUE is an independent, as is Imad. I think that we are taxpayers and we are whatever, and we need to be in organizations and companies and corporations. But I think that there should be a move towards making the next big agency inside the community as well. So the first question I'd have for you, Kevin, is, in the event that, and Imad, is that in the event that is it even feasible to create Black agencies? What would the barriers to that be? And would there be the ability to pick up, you talked about P&G, is there an ability for these agencies to pick up large clients, or would they face some sort of rebellion from the large agencies?
Imad, you want to jump in on that?
Man. Sorry, could you repeat that again?
like how feasible is it to create a Black agency? Right. What are the barriers? And do you see, can you even get the large contracts, or do you see, arguments of reverse discrimination? And then I have a second question that pertains to this in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like I said previously, there's things that can help build a sustainable future, like getting those full-time jobs, securing a lot of those resources that can help you build a longer plan, 5 to 10 years, instead of figuring out what the next 3 to 4 months looks like. Mm-hmm. So I think helping, whether it's a small company like myself or others that are creating small boutique agencies, how can we help them grow? But I also agree with what Kevin and Ashley were saying. It's kind of mixing it up, and that goes, I guess, more with the full-time roles, and making sure that those, if there's BIPOC hired, they're not just hired at an intern level or a low level. If they're not, then they're hired at a higher level, or they're helped developing their skills to get to those higher levels over the course of whatever years. And train to hire as well is a big thing too, where get them involved, get the opportunities, get them on set, for example, as a director, get them on set, get the experience for them, so that they get those 1 to 2 jobs, and then help them get more opportunities from there.
Okay.
But I guess the thing is that I'm not sure I want to be labeled as a Black agency.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. Mm-hmm. This, yeah.
Can be 80% BIPOC, although our culture is very much surrounded in the Black culture. Although many of our accounts can be Black inspired. Oh, and by the way, I have a couple of very big blue chip accounts too, because we're just good. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way, if I was to open a Black agency, that's how I would love to come to the market and not feel like I had the black community cornered. No, I'm good enough to get more than just that.
Totally agree with that.
So I'm going to go to Kaya and Christine, and like, as two of the individuals who, and everybody on this call, who are unique in your spaces, do you find that when you do work that you are looked to as the Black, or the person that they go to for Black stuff, like even within these agencies?
I can jump in first. I don't find that within the work that I do that I'm asked to do things that are just specifically shown as Black. I have quite a range of different clients that I work on, and because it's a very unique space within the industry, there's few and far of us in general. Mm-hmm. So I don't really get labeled as that, and Canadian content doesn't call for a lot of traditionally Black sounds, so I don't even have the opportunity to work on things that are that specific. It's more of externally facing. So if I'm asked to be on a panel, I will most likely be asked to be on one in regards to hip hop or R&B, or about the Black experience, or about the female experience, rather than being asked to speak on my expertise in the field. So maybe I will be passed up for a speaking engagement to, educate people about what I do, to incorporate artists, to have them get revenue streams because we support artists a lot. I'll be passed off by larger organizations, maybe a North by, or a Canadian Music Week, but I will be asked by smaller organizations to speak about my experience. So I don't find it so much on the work front, but how what I do is communicated outward.
Okay. Steve, do you find that you're like the cultural producer, like they look to you to do productions that are Black facing?
Yeah, actually a lot of the time. I think my experience is a little different. I guess also being a little younger in the industry, when brands or clients are looking to kind of spice things up, they kind of look for like that one person who they think is kind of like culturally tapped in, who has, I guess, like connections to other people in the culture that will either like be the face of something, or kind of, speak as like a spokesperson for their, I guess, overarching agenda. So a lot of the time, I feel like for me, I wouldn't say it's specifically for only Black things, but definitely there's a lot, especially post BLM, there's been a lot of interest in working like with Black creatives, Black female creatives, because they definitely want to be aligned with that look or that energy or just what we have to offer. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I also do believe it makes you kind of feel like, does this person like me or want to work with me because my work or what I do is actually good enough, or because it's trendy right now, or it's trendy to them, period. So that's definitely something I've experienced.
Perfect. So, like, as I said at the beginning, the media space, the creative space, the ad agency space are intertwined inextricably with the music industry. Recently, obviously, we lost Chadwick Boseman. He has been in all of these movies that, 42 and James Brown, Get On Up, and obviously Black Panther. What was the role, in your collective opinion, we'll start with Kevin and come right back, of the importance of Black creatives in creating authentic product and placement of proper music? Kaya, we'll go to you after. How important is the importance of Black people in these spaces in creating authentic product that shows us properly?
Look, I think, when we think about the Black culture and the gift that it gives and keeps on giving, I think that, think about a world without the Chadwicks, think about the music and the void that would be there. So do I believe that we have something to offer, and what is the value of that? I think that it's huge, and we keep on seeing it. You think even for a very diverse, country that we have in Canada, we actually have the opportunity day in and day out to kind of share that culture. And I think that, you know, there is this idea, and I mentioned it a lot about, you know, it's not only just the Blacks, but the lovers of Black culture. And I think when you think about Canada and how diverse it is, and naturally how people want to experience different cultures, there is this thing where the non-Blacks are really interested and wanting to be lovers of that Black culture. So I think the stage will continually be there for us, and the opportunity to introduce the next Chadwick, and the next production and the next content opportunities as well. And I think this window that we're living in right now, because it is a window, where we have this focus and this opportunity to put out a bunch of seeds out there. We need to sprinkle as many seeds as we can so that next year and the year after we're seeing the manifestation of all of this conversation that we're having now through our content, through what we see on digital platforms, linear TV. Like we need to see the fruits of our labor.
Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I echo those thoughts where I do feel that the platforms are here in this short window. But you know, as we've talked about, Ian, and as I've said in a lot of, you know, curatorial statements or media interviews, I also think that we need to consider how big those platforms are. And for me, I've always been one to push Blackness and Black creatives and BIPOC folk into the mainstream positioning rather than our own pond that we tend to stay within and feel that we're creating a lot of change there. We aren't creating change, we're creating opportunities for each other. But if we're going to use, you know, the Black Panther as the marker, that to me is the ultimate signifier of a mainstream positioning, right? Like you had the backing of a major production house, you had the backing of Marvel or whoever it is. I think it's Marvel Comics.
Marvel, yeah.
You had the backing of all the Cineplexes launching it and making it this big, massive launch that was happening globally for people to celebrate. And had that been an independent project that Chad decided to do on his own with some of his homies and said, we're going to represent the Black Panthers, it's not going to have the same output and it's not going to have the same impact. And we wouldn't be celebrating this man the same way that we were a few days ago had it been not that case. So I think it's also, it goes back to what I was saying where, you know, you can't, instead of trying to be resisting of the system and working with the non-Blacks and not getting in and to the larger platforms and wanting to be independent and wanting to start small, thinking large and positioning ourselves with the big players and the big stages, and what mainstream positioning means versus what creating our own lens is. And I think that you have to be, there's this beautiful synergy of both right now where Black is hot and Black is trendy. And you got to use that and think really large scale and use your resources or get in front of the resources that will magnify the message and your stage now, while we have that window. And that's kind of where my mind frame has been with that.
So I'm gonna reiterate like my point that I think that the revolution will be staged internally and externally. I'm gonna go to HINDZ and Imad and Kaya, because I'm going to use the opposite example of like large scale production, but the importance of like, so I'm gonna talk about Insecure and how music supervisors and directors and small individuals have brought small Black artists and Black creatives to the forefront. You know, HINDZ, Imad, Christine, Kaya, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think Insecure is a really great example of putting forth Black culture and doing it from a large scale to a small scale. So really bringing people up and elevating them to a more mainstream platform. But again, like there's still non-BIPOC people within that, but I think it's from the creator, the showrunner, like predominant director. You have Issa Rae, you have Lena White, you have Melina. You know, those are people who are holding their vision the whole way through. they are very involved in the creative process. So it's about them being met up because they're the decision makers. So that means that everybody down ways, and they have a white music supervisor, like he is he's really digging and finding all those things because he needs to please these decision makers. So it's about having the creative voice met, not only like to best serve what's there. And we also need to see this type of content created in Canada because we're talking about references that are US based. So of course, not only do they have the bigger platform because of the eyes and because of the audience, but they're telling these stories, and these stories do exist. We need these figures in Canada. We need to push beyond the traditional definition of Canadian to allow us to be competitive, because yes, we're in a moment where Black is trending and we need to take advantage of that. We need that even more so here, and to keep that trending here, because we're not as competitive on a global scale as the US. We're not creating the Black Panther, we're not creating Insecure. So we're not even like a global competitor anymore. Or you see May I Destroy You coming out of the UK. There's champion voices and really high quality, award-winning, award-nominated work being created about the Black experience, but that's not happening here.
Okay.
Sorry, why is that? Why do you think that is? Sorry.
Yeah, well, it goes down to the systemic level, all of these structures who are funding projects. We look at the grant system. Is the grant system equitable? Does the grant system have historic biases that continue on? We need to make sure that those things are equitable. And also with the change in more Black culture becoming pop culture, it needs to shift at the same rate. You know, like everyone talks about hip hop artists from Canada internationally, and they go there and they get the American deals. They're not trying to do the Canadian deals, get the Canadian dollars and bust their ass here to not become competitive. You bypass Canada in order to do it, and you're not recognized by the structures that are here. So it's going to take a big change within the system in how things are funded, because that's a big part of it. When we have creative funding in Canada and they don't have it anywhere else, it's going to have to change from the system to allow for this creative there, or we're going to experience a lot of brain drain where all of the creatives that can't get paid to do really interesting work in Canada are going to go to the US and are going to go to the UK and actually get the work done there.
Sorry, because I know I got to bounce soon, but
yeah, I want to ask you a question before you go too. Go ahead.
Okay, so I agree with everything you've said, but I'm going to go back to something that Ashley was and we've been talking about a lot already, which is I think we need to change our attitude. In addition to the points that KS made in terms of changing some of that the process in order to allow us to get to the table. If you take a look at Black Canadians, for as long as we can remember, we've always played and sat behind the Black American experience. We've always. And in many ways, we look to the Black Americans to help dictate and build out our culture. When in fact, what should be happening is we actually have a global experience. If you think about Canadians by nature, and you think about how we can pivot and our relationship with the US and the UK and around the world, we're actually perfectly positioned to create something that is global with the proper resources.
Yes. So it's not about the ability. The ability is not the question. The creativity is not the question. It is the access.
Yeah, I would just say that we actually need to step into that confidently and own it, because nobody's going to give it to us. So we have a bunch of really creative individuals, but we sometimes take a back seat to the Black American experience or their role to drive. And I think we are perfectly positioned globally to own that.
So I want to get to HINDZ and Christine as soon as we're going to let Kevin go. But before you go, Kevin, Kaya had mentioned systemics. In episode 3, we had a conversation about radio, and we had talked about ad agencies and the possibility that buyers were uninterested in an urban dictate, that they were saying that they didn't want to purchase ads with stations that didn't have lots of stations in their portfolio, or they didn't want to be associated with Black music or urban music. In your experience, has that been something that you've seen at the large in your blue chips and your high-end clients?
I have not. So there's a couple of things behind that. Number one, I believe that in many cases we haven't done a good enough job to create a compelling story about why us, why the Black media property. If you take a look at it from a Black Canadian group, we don't have a lot of empirical data apart from government stats about us. We don't know how much we generate. Is that me? Oh. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. We need to start building up empirical data and research about why connect with the Black community, told to brands. And I think we still need to help fill the gaps behind that, number one. Number two, as it relates to the radio example, at the end of the day, buyers buy on eyeballs, on listenership, on these very archaic currencies. That's the way it works. Mm-hmm. We sometimes can't play on that because of how niche our community is. Where the opportunity lies is creating a deeper, more connected connection between the Black community and brands. And there's so many great stories about how you can do that. You think about Adidas, you think about technology, you think about electronics, you think about fashion. All of those industries and categories naturally have a really great story about why the Black community.
Okay, we have to bid you adieu. I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, but I will get killed by your executive assistant. Okay, so thank you, Kevin, for sharing. I'm going to continue the conversation, and I want to go to Christine and
thank you.
And
yeah, thank you.
And thank you so much.
Thanks for doing it.
And speak about the creatives in the creation of authentic and culturally
Ian,
yeah.
Before you jump to that, there's something that I feel like I'd love to hear based on where we just left.
Okay, go ahead.
You made point, Kai, in regards to access, and we kind of trickled over, is there systematic issues of us getting to what Kevin and you guys were talking about, but not really addressing exactly what those issues are. And I'm wondering what you guys' overall thoughts are in regards to what are those exact systematic issues that we face when it comes to building our own opportunities, I guess. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think there should be audits of the systems, especially those that are providing money from the government. If we're looking at where money from the government has historically gone, what is the ROI on that? Where does that entity fit within the larger global the larger landscape of Canada? So if we do a lot of funding towards, say, in creative spaces, the opera or the National Ballet of Canada, is that having the same ROI as putting that money into BIPOC creatives, something that's more specific or something that's also competitive, right? We're not seeing the same return or the same audiences and opportunities for the eyeballs in some sectors. So I think that the first thing would be an audit of especially governmental systems where they're giving money, if there's specific genres, if there's within specific genres, is there more representation or not? Because I think another big thing is the Black creatives, especially in the music industry, are somewhat being segmented into just hip hop and R&B when they could be of any genre. And there is some more sway and opportunities given to certain genres within this country that we're missing out on the space by just that type of segmentation. So I think an audit to see where things are to properly bring in where we can go with it.
So I have a question. Kevin's not here to answer it, and then I want to go to Christine. He mentioned that we don't have statistics on certain aspects of the industry, and you know, you've touched on it, Kaya. My question would be, whose responsibility is it to collect these statistics? Is it the ad agencies? Like, for instance, you know, Imad, you might be able to speak on this. In the radio space, agencies pay into radio research and information gathering. Is it the agency space? Is it is it a governmental space? Is it our responsibility as a Black community to figure out how much money it is that we are generating and the derivatives of our efforts? That's a rhetorical question. Before I go on to, I want to go to Christine. You know, Click had talked about systemics. Do you find that as a Black person aspiring to, because you're young, right, as you've pointed out, I don't want to be the ageist, who aspire to carve out careers in the creative space, that you face more discrimination, both conscious and subconscious, than you think your peers do?
Sorry. I don't think that I face more discrimination than my peers do. I definitely think that it's just general across the board. I think that we all have different experiences. And I think that we're all just kind of fighting, especially like with directing and storytelling, you're kind of just fighting to tell your story as you experience it, right? And not really have it be swayed or skewed by anyone else. So, I mean, I feel like discrimination is always going to be there. And I feel like we've all experienced it in different ways, in different aspects, but it's just done genuinely about how, like conversations like this, how we move forward from it, how we create change, and how we kind of create mandates so that we don't experience it as much in the spaces that we occupy. Okay.
Imad, do you find that, sorry, a poll just popped up in front of me. Do you find that you face, and HINDZ, do you guys find that you've faced discrimination that you think that your peers in the directorial or agency spaces have not? Like white, non-Black peers?
I personally, I don't think so. But I agree a lot with Christine, as I feel it's more that a lot of times you're just fighting to get your story across and not having the people in the higher end positions, when they hire you for a project to tell a story and they kind of want to go in a certain direction, they'll kind of want to tamper with the culture of it or put their doses of what they may think Black culture is or whatever. But in the sense of discrimination versus other groups, I don't think so.
So if they're tampering with the, you know, like when in my call with many of you prior, I talked about, you know, like the inclusion of culture, but not the inclusion of people. If people are tampering with the culture and putting their take of what it is, isn't that based in some sort of stereotypical understanding of what the culture is?
Yeah, for sure. Like when I was talking about a situation that my partner went through just this weekend shooting a project, they wanted to tell stories of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And they wanted to bring in authentic stories, really from the heart, from the emotions. And through everything was great through the shoot. They got great perspectives, great stories. And through the revision process, basically every story was taken out by the higher ups. And the whole board was all Caucasian, but every story was taken out by the higher ups, to the point it turned into almost just a music video for a clothing line. Instead of the stories, they just said, we want more attitude. And that was like, that point right there was like, everybody was kind of very offended. And it was a lot of friction because the whole board everybody was Caucasian, and they hired a group of, everybody was African and one cinematographer Persian. And they just blatantly said, yeah, we don't need these stories, but we just want more attitude.
Ashley, Imad?
Sure, I can jump in there. Discrimination is a funny thing because it can come through in microaggressions, I think, and where I think some of us may assume that we haven't faced discrimination. I definitely can say that I think I have, even though not outwardly and not in ways that people would think are discrimination. I think it's more of exploitation and value, right? So as Black creatives, having to bring other Black creatives to the table and having to, like as a Black female, maybe not being as quickly valued as maybe what a white male would be in this industry and what I can ask for. And I quickly learned in the last few years to just demand what the value is, and that's it. Like that the work is going to have to speak for itself. But I think that we take an L a lot of times when we're putting together these ideas. And I've heard of people working in the industry, like, Trey Anthony, a good friend of mine, who, just kudos to her. She just landed a really big contract with a network here, a Canadian network, but the fight that she had to go through when it was her ownership of the idea, her story, her lens, her partnership with Ngozi Paul, to have to fight to get the full value and not be exploited to having 5% of what would be coming into them and the 95 going back to the network. And I think in those contracts and those micro ways where we're making contracts, setting values, asking to bring in other Black creatives, asking for a Black cast, asking for a Black art show that falls outside of the lens of, Black History Month or like something that's very specific for us, the value and the budgets get a lot lower. So when I talk about discrimination, yes, I think we all face it quite a bit, but you're not going to see it in a sense that it's like outward, right? I think that we have to look at what the margins are, what we should be paid, and what industry standards are, not our personal standards, industry standards are, and then we'll start identifying, are we being exploited or discriminated against?
Yeah, and some of the things are, like Ashley said, they're indirect, like they don't happen right in front of your eyes. And there's times where I pitch things, for example, and eventually you just kind of move on because you go there time after time trying to work through things that eventually what I would take somewhere else and would fly, but it just wouldn't fly because they wanted a specific Black culture type of concept, and it just didn't really work. And I didn't want to obviously shift into what it was that they were looking for. It kind of also goes into the way some grants are sometimes, which is why I hesitate with certain grants, because it just feels very rigid and not really what I'd like to apply for. And even if I end up getting it, I look at it and I'm like, this is not really what I intended to do in the first place. So there's things that need to obviously change in terms of like how rigid they are. And yeah, and then in terms of just like the process of certain brands or certain labels, like being a bit more open to other things that don't fit what they expect us to pitch, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So some of those things are systemic, and the question that, HINDZ raised an interesting question for me. So for all 5 panelists, what is the personal price of going against a client in the event that, Kaya, they're pitching something that you feel is culturally hurtful or intolerant of the Black community, or Christine, or HINDZ, they want to create something that shows Black people in a negative way or stigma, or Ashley or Imad, like, from the creative director and owner position, where and a client wants to do something that you feel uncomfortable with. What is the personal price of going against that, short term and long term?
I can chime in quickly on just like, so I haven't actually run into those types of situations, but I think we were talking about it before. Like, I think there are those conversations happening, for example, with maybe other production studios where those conversations happen. And I'd love to kind of hear those stories, but those conversations will happen with brands where they'll want a certain direction, and maybe the lack of BIPOC within those conversations is low, and so things will just kind of carry on. But if there are things that, if those brands, and maybe that example I provided before was one of those brands where it just, the conversations just wouldn't go anywhere because I wasn't willing to go down that route, and it would just kind of just deflate and just nothing would happen. So yeah, and I think that just needs to, and it benefits them too. Like if they take a different direction in a route, it will be more relatable and realistic rather than just settling with something that they always do.
Christine, have you run across that?
Yeah, I think that to Imad's point, a lot of the time, like when we try to at least give suggestions on what we think would be, I guess, beneficial for our client or brand or whatever that may be, it's genuinely because we understand our experience, because we've lived this life and we understand how it should be shown and I guess the story should be told. So a lot of the time, whenever you, I guess, go against what people are looking for, or exactly not being like a yes man, I suppose, like a lot of times you risk like losing the opportunity in itself completely, or I guess ruining the relationship, or people deciding to not continue on with the project. But I mean, like sometimes you kind of have to do what you feel is best and kind of go with your gut. I feel like I've faced that a lot of the times where people have asked me to create or tell stories where I didn't feel comfortable because there just wasn't enough representation like in the cast, or there wasn't representation in the crew, and it just didn't make me feel comfortable telling the story because I knew that it wouldn't translate in the way that it's supposed to. So
okay.
I haven't had any situations where I've had to really make a decision. Is this something I need to step away from, or is this something that I can see through? But I find that if I'm in a situation where I'm working on a scene and the scene is telling a BIPOC story, and maybe the story is specifically about their identity, if I'm pitching music, I will highlight, you always have to give a range of options, but I will say these are BIPOC artists who will speak to this experience and really try to convey that message to whoever the decision makers are. It goes up a couple of ranks, but if you continuously put, I try to use like my initial curation to put in front of them stuff that works best, especially for the story and the larger story, by having those types of voices represented. I think that where we're seeing shifts, especially on the advertising side, is maybe not the opportunity to fully step away, but to ask more specifically what is asked, what is laid out in a brief. You know, we see a lot of large, more vague terms. Urban is used continuously. Urban can mean so much more now, and especially in the range of music, what do you actually mean? So I think there might be the opportunity whether to ask more specifically, what do you want by that? Do you want hip hop? Of hip hop, what type of hip hop do you want? If that's what you mean by urban, just sort of turning the lens to them to be more introspective of what they actually want from a brief, because it will help me to meet that brief properly without dancing around what they actually want, and then hopefully to best serve them and serve the story to have an authentic voice in there.
So Kaya, you like the music supervisor plays a huge role in terms of the music that is that's used in productions, from commercials to syncs, etc. I want to go to HINDZ and Christine again, as well as Ashley and Imad. What is the role of the other creatives, and how important is it in these spaces that there are other creatives apart from the music supervisor? You know, yesterday I mentioned in my call to you, the cutest monkey in the jungle t-shirt, and how how that accidentally, quote unquote, got by. So what role does the presence or absence of other creatives in these spaces have on the creation, for instance, of, music or music plots, or like plots that are hurtful to the Black community?
I can chime in there. I guess like to our points previously as well, especially with the coolest monkey in the jungle thing that we had spoken about. A lot of the time, if there are people in positions to, like, I guess decision-making positions, those things don't get overlooked, essentially. Meaning that like that shirt would have never went into production if there was at least 3 Black people to see that before it went into production. So, I mean, like a lot of the time, especially with music videos, production, anything of the sort that we all do, if at least one of our eyes touches it or sees it, we can at least call out or give suggestions on what we think might be better before it actually like hits the market or anyone else sees it, as opposed to just a bunch of people who think that they understand what is best, just giving the okay.
Okay. Like, did you want to jump in?
I think one of the questions I have is more about like the pipeline, more of a solution-based conversation in regards to, well, first, here's the first question. What areas of where you work, so Christine doing the music video, Ashley in your work, even as a curator and as an ad, HINDZ as a director, Imad as a producer, and I think Imad, it might be a little different for you because you actually are involved in picking who works on your sets and picking that stuff. But I'm curious, how many Black people do you see, or actually let me rephrase the question, what areas do you not see Black people in? So for example, I know like when I go and do concerts and I have an artist on tour, it's not that often I see like Black people as the stagehands, or I see people that are the roadies, especially in Canada. I don't see a lot of us as as the sound person. So I'm curious, what are the areas you're not seeing us in? Anybody can start.
I see it more on the client side as well, partner side. Like that's obviously less control on my side on those sort of things, but that's where I see it most. And then obviously, I think we spoke on this earlier, that the higher up you go, the less BIPOC there is. So that's where it jumps to me right off the start. But I'll let the other ones chime in on where they think. They also see it.
Yeah, I see a lack in the client side as well. And then also, I see a lot of Black creatives actually, but maybe in the production side of things, like lighting, grips, like you said, the sound guys. I definitely see a lack of people in those positions. And then obviously higher ups and clients. I rarely ever have any Black clients.
Christine?
I think I also see a lack of the client side. I also see a lack of like Black females on like the production side as well. That's something that I don't see a lot. A lot of the times when I come on set, I'm probably the only one. So yeah, I definitely think that there's something to be said about that.
Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, I echo all of it. I think I always have a little bit more opinion about this too. Again, because of the resistance to getting into these positions, because I don't see people a lot of times. Just to backtrack to the question that was asked before from Ian, when we were just talking about like a lot of times, like I didn't get to make decisions until I was in a certain role. As a graphic designer, I had zero say. As a creative director, I had all the say. Right? As a creative leader, director of operations, I had all the say. As a curator, I had all the say. As an artist, not so much. So I think I don't see people in the decision-making roles. I get called upon to fill those roles, sometimes contract, sometimes independent. Like we look at people like Gaetan and Julie Crooks and those people who are at the power plant or in the AGO, and they are decision makers, even though they're dealing with a lot of red tapes, but Gaetan specifically is the director of the power plant. You can count the amount of Black women and Black people, but then Black women that are on these roles that are in institutions, that are in corporate environments, hence why you have Kevin on here, right? So that it doesn't exist. But also I think it's still, I still stand by we having to reclaim space and reimagine how we come in these spaces. Had there been somebody on the marketing team or the PR team of that, who was it, H&M who did that shirt or whatever, that wouldn't have happened, right? So, but again, it's us the saying, am I too good for a 9-to-5? Am I too good for the corporate environment? Do I need to do this on my own and start my own agency and stuff like that? And I think that that's great, but we have to get into the systems, conquer the systems,
Definitely.
get to those roles, make that change, then branch out on our own with that experience.
Definitely. So sorry,
Well,
Click.
I wanted HINDZ to hear HINDZ before we go anywhere else as well.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to like what other, I don't know, did you mention what other areas you're not seeing people when you're on your Pacific projects that you're not seeing Black people in certain roles? Your mic. Your microphone, sorry. It's turned off, Heinz.
Yeah, I think I touched on it already, but
okay.
I said I see a lot of Black creatives, and I think what she just said, a lot of people may not want 9-to-5s and whatnot. They don't want to actually be a part of the system. So I do see a lot of Black creatives, but I just don't see a lot of Black people in the production side of things, like sound, like lighting, and then clients, and then of course in the higher ups, like the actual brands and stuff.
Okay,
but
so
I do see a lot of artists.
So then, what do you guys believe is the solution to fixing some of this? Do you believe in diversity inclusion boards? Do you think like these companies have to have these certain things in place just to be able to bring more Black people into these roles? What are your thoughts in regards to how we actually put more people into certain positions that do not exist?
I'm wondering if it's the HR area for companies, because I know companies that have diversity boards, but I don't know if they include the HR or like the recruiters, and they're the ones that are a lot of the times hiring people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that that's something that's going to have to change, is how we hire and how you reach out. A lot of agencies have programs where they bring in college students. So are we using the same set of students all the time? Are you reaching out to the same networks constantly to put up job postings? Is there ones that are more catered to BIPOC specific that we can also investigate? I think it's working a little bit harder to not continuously do the same thing and expect the same results, but also that there is a mandate that we need to do more and to look out and to try to incorporate more voices as possible. I also think that within the structures, again, going back to briefs, is looking at people in the room. If you're in an agency and you're working with whoever you are on your team in the specific brand, if that team doesn't have somebody of color and you're worried about a brief, or you're trying to cater it to more towards, you think that audience is reaching out beyond. Things just move really quickly, and you have to go through so many levels of approval, which is why this example of the H&M shirt and the young boy wearing it is crazy, and how, with different big brands, how these types of things still happen is because there's so many layers of approval that shows that there's nobody there. Reach out beyond that, move a little bit slower to make sure that you're accounting for these potential problems.
And I also wanted to add that, like, going back to what I was saying about train to hire, like if there's ever doubts that they're not, so one thing is the HR side, which I think they just need to like be a bit, like what Kaya's saying, like be a bit more, change the approach. There's also just that if there's ever that sense of hesitation, there's always an opportunity to get, and I know people, like, I know, for example, like Mantle's doing that right now, where they're doing like a train to hire program where they're getting, whether
who's that?
I think it's Mantle. That's like they represent DPs and production designers, and they're doing train to hire where they get like BIPOC, getting them in like on set, getting them experience, and then that way they have like a ton of experience on like those major production jobs, and there's less excuses for people to hire them. On these jobs. That's one approach. I also, and then going back to like the brands or clients that I have, like they just need to not just hire, this is just a guess, but like not just focus on interns and the low level jobs, or if they go to those levels, they have to be able to like give them full-time jobs and have them grow, give them those opportunities to grow, and not just settle in that one place. And look for hiring at director level, at above managerial levels.
Perhaps even auditing, like for agencies or other entities that are looking to hire in creatives, where do we hire the most BIPOC creatives? Is it only when we're using specific brands that we think are trying to cater to that demographic? Do we think that they can't tell any other type of story? Is there the opportunity to put them in any other position? Because there's constantly different types of creative that needs to be done. So to make sure that those opportunities exist for absolutely everybody, and they're not just being segmented to a certain type of story.
Yeah.
Also, I was just going to say.
Go ahead, Ashley. Go.
We touched on this a bit lightly, but obviously there's policy making, right? And there's diversity training that's coming into a lot of places. And I do actually believe in diversity boards being put together and people employing inclusion and diversity into their higher up positions. But I also think there's governance that we have to look at that might not always be happening with these. So when we do set out to establish a budget or a grant, or when we do put together these roles and we rework our mandates, do we have governance to hold those who are doing it accountable to make sure that we're actually measuring the result of what they've put out? And I think that that's the biggest thing, is that we don't always have governance. So a lot of things, we had the discussion about the black box and money going out and people just writing checks and then saying we're doing diversity hires, but there's no governance to really track it. So I think that especially for the non-BIPAC folk and the institutions as they hire, is really employing committees or some type of structure that is going to hold you accountable for that.
And so one of the questions that I would ask then based on that, and I believe we lose Ashley in a few minutes as well, so I want to try and get as much out of you as possible as well. Do you guys find that creatives in the space are being paid equally? And with the absence of race-based data, what do we do about that? Like Ashley, you had touched on, asking for the actual value of the work, but how do we know what creative, like a peer creative director in another agency versus yourself would be paid outside of what's on Indeed?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I just answered this, I think, on my working culture panel on Saturday, because a lot of us, I don't think, realize that there are structures in place. Like there's a Canadian artist representation. Carfax has everything listed out. You can know what you're supposed to be paid for a panel, to what you're supposed to be getting paid by a gallery, to what you're supposed to be paid as a producer. There's also like Vitamin T, Creative Circle, the Creative Group. They put out digests every year that lists what the going rate is for every position that we're talking about here that we're on is listed in those digests. So again, it's I think in some sense it's about access. I don't know if we need to do more research. I've always said outreach is a big thing, understanding how to get BIPOC folk, how to get their how to get to them through outreach and job fairs and etc. But also us doing our diligence as well as BIPOC folk and looking for those. Like Indeed it's fluctuating, right? So going through the professionals that have these digests that are for free, or these Canadian legal systems that have these things listed for us to educate ourselves on what those going rates are. It's all accessible and free.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, I wanted to go to the are you joking? I wanted to go to the music space for a moment, and I wanted to touch on, the creatives and the, sorry, I'm distracted by the phone call, obviously. The type of music that is utilized in ad campaigns in terms of the number of Black artists placed in these campaigns, and then to like the Christinas and the HINDZ, like the impact of the type of music chosen on the narratives that you guys have to make based on them. Like, is it like we pick a hip hop record and now we're doing the Homeboy commercial or the Homeboy like narrative? You guys find that? I freeze.
No, kind of mine froze here too. Personally, no, I don't think I don't believe I actually ran into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like, I guess with music videos, I have experienced that. A lot of the time, sometimes even if it's through a label, they already have a very clear vision of what they'd like the video or project to look like. And a lot of the time you don't have much. You have creative control, of course, but it's not necessarily the amount that we'd hope to have. Mm-hmm. So it's very guided in the sense where they've already kind of planned out what they want it to look like. And sometimes that's not very authentic to actually what's going on or what the actual I guess, song even is. Like, a lot of the time when it's a hip hop song, we expect it to be like on the block. Everyone, you know, like you and your 10 mans in front of the car, but sometimes that's just not the vibe, you know? So.
Imad and Kaya, you know, in terms of the types of campaigns that you are finding are aligned with Black music artists, you know, is it like, are they confined to the same on the block thing? Or, you know, Click had talked about 2 Black guys fishing. Like, do you find that when there's Black music involved, it is restricting to the type of stories, even HINDZ and Ashley and Christine, the kind of stories that you can tell behind them?
No, I haven't had anything that was very specific to that. In the advertising space, when you're looking at music supervision, a lot of time they're looking at just banger tracks, really well-known songs.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have the opportunity to play with newer artists. You have to have a more, it all depends on like the category of the brand as well and what types of sounds they have, but I haven't had anything that's specifically marrying up to the creative because there is a Black story within it. It's more just less opportunity to lean into some traditionally Black sounds.
Okay.
In general.
And do you think that, like, this is a question for everyone, could the presence of Black creatives increase the amount of commissioned work, like we talked about Insecure, like myself and Christine talked about P-Valley, commissioned work by new artists, and how could this assist in the development of Black artists in the space? And Imad, you might be able to speak on this too.
I mean, I'll go back to like the other question. Like, I don't like the way we process our like the content. For example, like we'll produce the content and then get it scored and then get the music. So we will mainly find music or create music based on the visuals that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of goes like hand in hand. And then yeah, obviously if there's more, like to your last question is more creatives, more Black creatives than. Sorry, what was it again?
Yeah, more creatives in the space, can it increase the amount of commissioned work? Like, do you find that you're using, because like of your knowledge or Christine's knowledge or HINDZ's knowledge of independent artists, are you bringing independent artists into the space where they wouldn't otherwise have opportunity?
Especially from a Canadian standpoint, like being like we're thinking, this question comes from, I know where Ian's coming from. It's like, if we had more Black people in these spaces creating stuff, there's a more likelihood that, is there a more likelihood that we would actually be pulling up from our own backyard and putting our own Black artists on if we didn't have Black people in those spaces? Would that happen?
Yes. I really want to answer that before I go, but I'm going to let the other two finish first.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we've done it. I think it just needs to happen more. I've been fortunate enough to do it on certain campaigns where I would get someone from like a remix graduate and somebody that's done stuff a lot in the community that's that many of us know, and just getting them involved either as like a writer or to help build the narrative of a campaign, or a musician to create that music. Like it's, yes, and it needs to be happening more. I don't know if that's the question.
All right, we're about to lose Ashley. Thank you so much, Ash.
I want to make a comment on that.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Just because it's, I think it's a really important point, because I think that sometimes we don't see the impact of it as well, and especially coming from a curator lens, and as a creative director, yes, but as a curator, like when we look at shoot, now it's slipped me, Black as Fuck, Black AF,
yeah,
that TV show, I can't, Kenya Barris,
yeah.
How he inserted someone like Knowledge Bennett into the script and into that, and then all of a sudden we start having Black people thinking about acquiring art, and then we start developing that into the system of the contemporary art scene and how we're positioning our Black are Black artists, or it's like if I put on something like if I put on someone like Young Yummy or Alexis, and I have them in a larger scale. Perfect example, Nuit Blanche, who when I brought to Scarborough, right off the beaten path, when I brought Ebony G. Patterson, an artist that was from Jamaica, and I brought her to the stage for Nuit Blanche. She was one of my headlining artists, who later on, months later, Julie Crooks acquired her as a permanent installation at the AGO, mainstream positioning in the contemporary art space. So we have to always consider that as Black thought leaders and storytellers, how we engage and bring these creatives into our platform has a much bigger impact than we could have ever anticipated, and not just within our own understanding of how we collect art and position them, but also non-Blacks and how they start to bring them into the institutions and on the mainstream stage. So that's how I'm ending.
Thank you so much. Actually, I mean, to dovetail off of what you're saying, this is what I was getting at when I emphasized the impact of the decisions that are made by decision makers such as Christine and HINDZ and Ashley and Kaya and Imad on our perception, the dissemination of stereotypes, the breaking down of racism, etc. And what that can do in terms of bringing us to advertising and in terms of type of advertising partnerships and brand association and influencer marketing and all of these other things. And
the ripple effect it has, the ripple effect in this country, like especially from a music industry standpoint, like if we're talking about the impact that we want to have on our own culture, our own voices, our own stories that you guys are creating aligned with artists and their music. If there's not a lot of people in these positions and they're not looking out for us, where do we go?
Yeah, and how authentic are our stories? Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. And we will see you soon. And we're just going to continue on. You want to just get into Q&A?
Yeah, let's just end with some Q&As that people have asked. And did you already have something you wanted to go to right away?
Go ahead.
Okay. One of them here is, what are your ideas to help brands find and engage Black Canadian agencies, and for agencies to find and engage Black creatives and producers and other professionals? What role could associations such as the Institute of Communication Agencies and Association of Canadian Advertisers play? Anybody have any thoughts to that?
So that's probably a question for Imad. How could brands find and engage Black Canadian agencies?
How can they find?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys always have to reach out to them, or is there work that can be done on their part?
I think there's a lot of areas where they can start. I mean, I'm one, here I am, if you're on this call. Like, I'm right here, and there's a few other people on this talk that you can go to. I also know other production studios. Yeah, exactly. I know other production studios that are Black run and BIPOC run, and that's a great starting point for you. There's Tier Zero that's doing some really cool things. There's New Currency that's doing some really cool things. Kid Studio. There's tons that are POC run and people know them. That's a great area to start. All of them don't just do music videos. They don't just do what you would think. We've done a ton of things in our portfolio that ranges from like a documentary to an alcohol brand for that what you expect might not be what we create, what you think we have created. So there's areas where you can start, and it actually starts right here. There's people you can contact. There's myself, there's HINDZ, there's some other people on here that you can contact. There's also other, like I've mentioned, Remix in the past, like that's another starting point. There's where have those graduates gone? It's kind of like a where are they now kind of thing. Like they've graduated, like see where they're at, what they've created, because they may have created something that you might be interested in. I think those are good starting spots.
Okay. We have a question that's specifically for Kaya. Someone said that they didn't even really know about music supervision as a job until they started working as a creative, and they started looking into sync licensing. They're wondering how many education programs exist in Canada that would help prepare people for that type of job, or some of the executive jobs that that we all hold in terms of internships, and would going into high schools talking about the types of jobs available make a difference in the industry. And actually, Christine, you can answer that as well, in terms of the next generation of professionals. Sorry, so Kaya first.
Yeah. So I think it's like with many creative jobs, it's a really non-linear way of getting into them. For me, for music supervision, I didn't do any type of educational thing specific to it. I actually did my degree at McGill in economics and political science. So completely non-linear. I think it's is showing your passion for it and trying to find different ways of getting into it. So if you look at any creative job, or just for this example, music supervision is one piece of a lot of different things. We get our music from labels, publishers, sync agents. So that's one way of finding more about it. We work with producers, editors, directors. That's another way of getting to find out more about it. I think it's about looking at those different touch points, because it's a really niche industry in a very small industry within Canada. So as we find with a lot of creative positions in Canada, like you have to wait for someone to die for you to be able to get into there, which is why we don't move around and see as much like progress or evolution of it. So until the market can really hold a sufficient amount, I think it's just going to be finding what different touch points you have that are close to it and finding your opening. Somebody moved out west and I jumped into their spot. It was completely timing. So I think don't be discouraged if you don't see that job come up. It is stay within those networks, stay connected in whatever way you can, and know that that is your ultimate goal. Maybe you find something else you want to do along the way. But yeah, I think that the education can start from lower. Everything can start from lower. It's just about having these types of platforms and having a diverse set of voices on there, and that means people from very different backgrounds that hold very different positions. So you're not still getting, okay, this is the director, this is the producer, this is the actor. Who else is involved in these industries?
Okay, Christina, HINDZ, what would you tell young people trying to get into the positions that you're in terms of education versus experience, et cetera, and what can they do to get into these large organizations, or to go independent like Imad or yourselves?
I think that, I guess to speak for myself, I wasn't like, I didn't go to school for what I do now either. I don't like have any like professional training in it. I am in school currently, funny enough, but I'm in school for something completely different. But I feel like it was more so kind of finding a community and people that were doing things that I was doing. Like I was in Remix as well. I think there also is like a bunch of resources for young people coming out of school or in school that want to be around like-minded creatives and people who are doing what they do, and they want to find where they fit in the industry. And I think that I guess things like this, and when we spoke about outreach, it's really important so that people know what is available to them, because I know there was a lot of people, like my friends coming out of school last year, like they didn't know where to go or what was available to them so that they could even start their careers or be in positions where they could make decisions or do what they wanted to do. So I think that it's more so just kind of finding your community, finding what works for you and the people around you so that you can, I guess, get started.
HINDZ?
Yeah, I would say it's tapping into multiple communities. For me, I didn't go to school or I didn't have any formal training. I was self-taught, and I don't like waiting for a position to happen. So I'll try to make a position for myself. But I think it's important to, one, the education. How do you get into these positions? Seeking out people in your city who have maybe have done these things. Seeing people here, contact people, get the information. But at the same time, just get your feet running. Like I just did a project for Facebook, and that happened from somebody over at Facebook seeing a video on TikTok I did. That's a very non-linear way of getting a gig with Facebook. So to me, it's like I try to involve myself in anywhere. If I'm waiting for a bigger opportunity, well, what can I do right now with the people around me, with my community? Can I create content online? Can I help with this music video? Can I go to these networking events and try to get in more of the corporate gigs. Because when I was younger, I was a natural introvert. I saw going into the corporate space hard for me because I'm like, I don't want to go and network. What can I do on the ground level? As I grew up, now I have my feet in multiple sectors and I stay busy because of that. I just like to take control. So I wouldn't be discouraged, but just try to involve yourself in different groups and communities and just seek as much knowledge as you want, because everything is out there now. Like, the knowledge is there. There's definitely roadblocks, but I believe every roadblock, there's a way to jump over it.
So we're just about finished, but as you talk about roadblocks, I want to ask Christine, Imad, and yourself. Imad just disappeared. Financing. Have you guys found that finance has been an obstacle for Black creatives such as yourselves?
There's how can I say this? I mentioned at the beginning of the call, like there's obviously like grants that you can apply for, but I'm not the biggest supporter of grants because I've kind of shifted gears. I remember when I first started getting into this, I tried the grant approach and it wasn't really, it was either like I had to wait 4 months to hear if like I was gonna get a grant, or it was like way too rigid and like based on how things maybe like went like 10 years ago. Like I feel like things change, things evolve. And I started to take it down more of the pitch approach and brands and clients and work that way. And there was a quicker response. It was more, could adapt more. But I think it goes back again to how those relationships are. Like I've always had great relationships with like my clients, and I always say with other companies or other Black-owned production studios or agencies, that to not only have those good relationships, but build like long relationships with them so that you can invest in your future, invest in your company, rather than just like those one-off contract jobs that won't really last long.
So what would you like to see there in terms of solutions, in terms of access to funding?
So depending on how you get your funding, but if you're getting your funding through partners or clients and producing something for them, continue to get those that funding and find ways to secure those relationships. So create not just contracts, but try to look for long-term contracts so that you're not, does that answer your question?
What would you like to see your partners do on their, like, you know, there's only so much that we can control from our side, right? Mm-hmm. What is it that you would like to see in terms of those partners assisting in your access?
For this applies for myself or for other Black-owned agencies, but to invest in long-term relationships with
us,
us, not just one house, because you want to have a full-time position. People want a life, a long-term thing. You know, they want their security. They want to invest in a team. They want to build a team, a diverse team. So you can only do that with. You can't do that with one-off contracts. You need long-term agreements and licenses. Yeah.
And I'm actually going to dovetail off of that before we close and ask Christina, who just disappeared. In terms of yourself as a director and a producer, you know, the same question in terms of what would you like to see in terms of the limitations that you face in obtaining jobs as a freelancer versus within companies, et cetera, et cetera. What would you like to see? Yes, you.
Yes.
I definitely would like to see, I guess, people really actually wanting to collaborate and really like actually seeking out people of color and different backgrounds and different perspectives. Do you mean, like, I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel like financially, like everyone's situation is different. I feel like if you're speaking to that specifically.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and in terms like, and we'll just close with this. I'll just ask everybody on the call, what is the biggest barrier that you face, and what is the suggestion? Because I kind of pointed you towards finance, for instance, but what is the biggest barrier that you face in your space, and what is the suggestion, or what would you like to see change in that? And we'll start with Kaya.
Yeah, I think that the biggest barrier, not only in my space, but I think with what I experience in my work is external external ideas of my identity. I think that I get pigeonholed into a lot of different ways, or be assumed of having a certain knowledge based on being a Black female, rather than have my work speak for itself, or the opportunity to let people know who I actually am. So I find that that is the barrier that I come up against.
Okay, perfect. HINDZ.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what she said. I'd also say the biggest barrier would be some just maybe a lack of education and knowledge of how to get in front of for certain people, or get in contact with certain brands. I think especially, I always think the power is in the youth. And I think if somebody does want to be an executive or be at the top of the agency, what is the roadmap for them? Like, how do we bring that information to them? Because I think everyone will just look, well, let me just do my own thing online. And because I don't know how to get there. And for me, I never knew the roadmap. Like, what's the roadmap? And creativity is a nonlinear, direction. But I think we do to get these stories that people have been able to get close to these situations, or do have the knowledge, and bring them forth. Because even certain things now, I'm like, I don't know how to get to that position. I don't know how to do that.
Yep. Imad?
I was also just gonna say, with funding, like, I support, I know people that have Black focused funds. I donate to those funds. We have projects that we actually donate to those charities and those funds, but I also just want grants to be more inclusive of BIPOC. I don't want there to be like a fund for BIPOC. I support it, but I feel like it's more than that. Like, I don't want it to just look like money that's cornered into a Black fund, and then the regular funds operate as they are. I feel like those regular funds just need to be more inclusive and more diverse, and have whether it's a more diverse panel or whatever it is. But I'm not against the Black funds. I'm just cautious of those, because I don't want organizations or brands to just put money aside to that and feel like they've checked it off and like that's all they need to do. I feel like it can be both. Have those funds, but also make your regular funds more inclusive.
Okay, and we will close with Christine. What is the biggest barrier that you see in your space and in entertainment and music, and how would you suggest that, or what would you like to see change there?
And I think it's all of these things, of course, but also just kind of like empowering creatives, and like what structures are kind of like, I think that looks like kind of creating structures to, I guess, ensure that people who, like creatives that are underserved and underrepresented, are actually being able to be trained or given the tools so that they can remain competitive in these kind of areas, so that they can actually stand a chance and actually get into positions, like decision-making positions, and make the change that they would like to see as well.
Okay, Click.
Yeah, today was awesome. I just sit back and listen to what everybody had to say, and I think there was some really, really powerful things. And I think the biggest thing I've kind of walked away, and I feel like it's like watching even the last 4 weeks, we have so much talent and so much skilled professionals in so many different areas. And I hope that what this has done is maybe brought more people together, meet more people, and opportunities for people to work together more and build a stronger infrastructure amongst ourselves as well. And at the same time, educate the people that are watching and realizing, oh, there is people in these spaces that maybe you did not realize existed, or realize that maybe there's a gap in our market to actually train and fulfill more roles that don't exist, that can be created from these conversations. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you for joining us and speaking with us, our speakers today. I really appreciate you all immensely. You know what I'm saying? So much love.
And I'll close with, it seems that the common denominator here is representation. Until there are more Kayas and more Imads and more, I know that Ashley and Kevin had spoken to breaking down structures inside, but more HINDZ and more Christinas, so that we have our voices present. Until the lion can speak, the hunter will always be the hero of the story. And so it's like, it's impossible for us to create and represent ourselves and our community and our culture properly if we're not represented. Otherwise, it'll be stereotypical placements and images, etc. And so with that, I'd like to thank you all for participating. This has been Breaking Down Racial Barriers, episode 5. We are back next week with a brand new time, I believe, Click?
Yes, yes.
So we are going to 6 p.m. Next week for episode 6. Episode 6, Click, is
artists, working with, we're gonna have a bunch of music artists speaking about their journey and their barriers and what they would like to see change.
Okay, so yeah, we will be back next week for Breaking Down Racial Barriers, episode 6. It will be featuring Miss Julie Black. Go ahead, Click.
I'm keeping it as a surprise. We got some gems coming though, so.
Okay, so we will see you guys next week, 6 p.m. Tuesday. Thank you, Kaya. Thank you, Christine, Imad, HINDZ, Kevin Johnson, and Ashley McKenzie-Barnes in absentia. And we will talk next week. Sam, take us out.